A rancher in northeastern Arizona called us 4 months ago. He spoke for 11 minutes. In those 11 minutes, he described something that had been visiting his property at night for 3 weeks. He described the way it moved. He described what it looked like in the beam of his truck headlights. He described the sound it made when it realized he had seen it. Then he asked us to delete the recording. He said he should not have called. He said talking about it was a mistake. He said that naming it, describing it, even acknowledging that it exists, can draw its attention. He said his grandmother told him that when he was a boy. He said he had spent 40 years believing that was superstition. He said he did not believe that anymore. We deleted the recording. We are not going to share what he described, because he asked us not to, and because we believe him when he says there are consequences to speaking about this carelessly. But we are going to talk about the phenomenon, because people keep encountering something in the Four Corners region of the American Southwest that does not match any known animal, that behaves with predatory intelligence, and that an entire culture with thousands of years of knowledge about this land refuses to discuss openly. The Navajo people have a name for it. Many of them will not say that name out loud. Tonight we are going to explore why. And by the end of this video, you may understand their silence better than you want to. Before we go any further, I need to say something directly. What we are about to discuss is sacred to the Navajo people. It is not a legend. It is not folklore. It is not a creepypasta. It is not a category of monster from a horror movie. It is a deeply serious element of Navajo spiritual belief. And the Navajo Nation has been clear, repeatedly and publicly, that they do not appreciate outsiders treating it as entertainment. I want to honor that. This video exists because non-native people are encountering something in the Southwest that they cannot explain, and because the most comprehensive framework for understanding those encounters belongs to a culture that has been observing this phenomenon for far longer than any of us have been alive. We are not going to sensationalize Navajo beliefs. We are not going to reduce a complex spiritual tradition to a monster profile. We are going to present what is publicly known with the respect it deserves. The Navajo word that is most commonly associated with this phenomenon is Ye Naldalushi. It translates roughly to one who walks on all fours, or one who goes on 4 legs. In Navajo tradition, this refers to a specific type of practitioner. A person who has gained certain abilities through transgressive spiritual acts. It is not a creature. It is not a species. It is, in the Navajo understanding, a human being who has chosen a path that grants them powers that include shape-shifting, voice mimicry, and extreme speed. This distinction matters enormously. The internet has turned the word skinwalker into a generic label for any creepy thing in the woods. That is not what the Navajo tradition describes. The Navajo tradition describes something far more specific and far more disturbing. A person who has willingly sacrificed their humanity for power. A person who looks human because they were human. A person who can look like your neighbor, your relative, your friend. Many Navajo people will not discuss this topic at all. Not because they do not believe in it. Because they do. The belief, shared across many families and communities, is that speaking about it, naming it, describing encounters with it, can attract its attention. Silence is not ignorance. Silence is protection. When an entire culture with deep generational knowledge of a landscape tells you that something exists and then tells you not to talk about it, the rational response is not to dismiss them. The rational response is to wonder what they know that you do not. The Four Corners region, where Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico meet, is one of the most sparsely populated areas in the continental United States. Outside of the towns and the highways, there are enormous stretches of desert, mesa, and canyon where the nearest person may be 30 or 40 miles away. People who live here, particularly ranchers, are accustomed to isolation and accustomed to wildlife. They know what coyotes sound like. They know what mountain lions look like at a distance. They know the difference between a deer and an elk in low light. And they keep reporting something that does not match any of those animals. The accounts come from ranchers, truck drivers, travelers on remote highways, and residents of rural communities throughout the Four Corners. They come from native and non-native people. They come from people who use the word skinwalker, and from people who have never heard the term. And across these accounts, from people who have no connection to each other, certain details repeat with a consistency that is difficult to explain as coincidence or suggestion. The first recurring detail is the movement. Witnesses describe something that moves faster than any known animal at ground level, not running in the way a dog or a coyote runs, covering distance in a way that appears to violate the mechanics of how a quadrupedal animal should be able to move. The descriptions often use the word gliding or skating, as though the thing's legs are moving, but the speed does not correspond to the stride. One rancher described it as watching a video at normal speed while the subject was playing at triple speed. The body was moving at one rate, and the ground was passing beneath it at another. The second recurring detail is the appearance. Witnesses most commonly describe something that resembles a large canid, a coyote, or a dog, but wrong. The proportions are off. The legs are too long. The body is too thin. The head is too large or positioned at a wrong angle, and the eyes are consistently described as human, not reflective animal eyes. Dark, fixed, aware, human eyes, set in a face that is otherwise animal. That detail, the human eyes in the animal face, appears in account after account from people who had no prior exposure to skinwalker lore. The third recurring detail is the mimicry. This connects directly to the voice mimicry phenomenon we investigated earlier this week. Witnesses in the Four Corners describe hearing voices at night, voices calling their name, voices of family members coming from outside the house or from the direction of the livestock pens, voices that sound exactly like someone they know, calling from a location where that person could not be. The behavioral pattern is identical to the Pacific Northwest mimicry accounts, a copied voice used as a lure. The fourth recurring detail is the response of animals. Dogs are described as reacting with extreme, atypical fear. Not aggression, fear. Dogs that normally bark at coyotes and confront intruders will hide, whine, and refuse to go outside. Horses become agitated and will not leave their stalls. Livestock cluster together and face outward. The animals in these accounts are behaving as though they recognize a predator that they know they cannot confront. This account comes from a long-haul truck driver who regularly ran routes through northeastern Arizona. He submitted it to us with the condition that we not identify the specific highway or the mile marker. He said he still drives that route, and he does not want whatever he saw to know he talked about it. His words, not ours. In March of 2021, around 2 a.m, he was driving a stretch of empty 2-lane highway between 2 small towns. No other vehicles. No structures visible. Just desert and darkness and his headlights on the road. He saw something on the shoulder of the highway ahead of him. At first he thought it was a large dog or a coyote. It was on 4 legs, low to the ground, facing away from him. As his headlights hit it, it turned its head toward the truck. Not its body. Its head. The head rotated to face him, while the body remained facing away. He said the rotation was smooth, mechanical, and covered a range that a canine skull should not be able to achieve. Then it ran. Not away from the truck. Alongside it. It accelerated from a standstill to his driving speed, which he estimated at 60 miles per hour, in what he described as about 2 seconds. It ran alongside his truck on the shoulder of the road, keeping pace with his cab window, for approximately 1/4 of a mile. He said during those seconds he could see it in his peripheral vision and briefly in the side mirror. It was not shaped like any animal he had seen in 30 years of driving through the Southwest. The legs were wrong. The gait was wrong. The speed was impossible. Then it veered off the road and disappeared into the darkness. Instantly. Not gradually. It was there, running at highway speed, and then It was not there. He pulled over a mile later and sat in his cab for 20 minutes. He called his wife. He did not tell her what he saw. He told her he loved her. He said he did not sleep the rest of the trip. He said he has driven that stretch of road dozens of times since, and he has never seen it again. But he said he drives that section faster now. And he does not look at the shoulder. The internet has done significant damage to the public understanding of this phenomenon. The word skinwalker has become a meme. It has become a category on horror subreddits. It has become a label that people apply to any unexplained encounter in any forest, desert, or backyard anywhere in the world. Someone hears a weird noise in Michigan and posts about a skinwalker. Someone's Ring camera captures a strange shadow in Florida and calls it a skinwalker. The term has been stripped of its cultural context and turned into a generic monster brand. This is a problem for two reasons. The first is that it is disrespectful to the Navajo people, whose spiritual tradition is being reduced to a content category. The second is that it makes the actual phenomenon harder to investigate, because the signal is buried in noise. When every unexplained encounter gets labeled as a skinwalker, the accounts that genuinely describe the consistent pattern of behaviors documented across the Four Corners region become indistinguishable from unrelated stories that borrowed the word for clicks. The Navajo tradition describes something specific, a human practitioner who has gained specific abilities through specific transgressions. The physical descriptions reported by witnesses in the Four Corners, the behavioral patterns, the mimicry, the speed, the animal with human eyes appearance, these match the tradition with uncomfortable precision. The random Reddit post about a shadow in someone's backyard in Ohio does not. If we are going to take this phenomenon seriously, and this channel does take it seriously, we need to distinguish between the cultural reality and the internet mythology. The cultural reality is older, more specific, and more frightening than anything a subreddit has produced. This account was submitted by a woman who lives on a cattle ranch in the northwest corner of New Mexico with her husband and 2 children. She is not Navajo. Her nearest neighbor is a Navajo family about 8 miles down the road. She has lived in the area for 19 years. In the fall of 2022, her dogs started behaving strangely at night. She had 3 dogs, all working dogs accustomed to being outside in the dark. They had always slept on the porch or in the yard. Beginning in mid-October, all 3 dogs refused to go outside after sundown. They crowded at the back door and whined until someone let them in. One of them, a 6-year-old healer who had never been afraid of anything, began trembling visibly every evening around dusk. Over the following 2 weeks, she and her husband noticed other changes. The cattle clustered at the center of the nearest pasture instead of spreading out to graze. The horses would not leave their stalls at night. The motion-activated light on the barn triggered repeatedly between midnight and 4 in the morning. The camera attached to the light captured nothing. The sensor detected motion, but the camera recorded an empty frame. On the night of October 29th, her husband was in bed, and she was up late reading in the front room. At approximately 11:30, she heard her husband call her name from outside. The voice came from the direction of the barn. It sounded exactly like him when he needed help. Her husband was in bed. She had walked past the bedroom 5 minutes earlier. He was asleep. She did not respond, and she did not go outside. She turned off the lights in the front room and stood in the dark, looking out the window toward the barn. She could not see anything. The motion light was not on. The yard was dark. Then, the motion light triggered. In the brief moment before it stabilized, she saw something standing at the edge of the light near the fence line. It was tall and upright, not on 4 legs but on 2. The proportions were wrong. The arms were too long. The posture leaned forward slightly, as if it was leaning toward the house. She said it was looking directly at the window where she was standing. The light stabilized, and the shape was gone. It did not retreat. It was simply gone. The area remained fully illuminated. Nothing was there. The next day, she drove to her Navajo neighbor's property. She did not describe what she had seen. She only asked if anything unusual had happened recently. The neighbor looked at her for a long time. Then she spoke quietly and gave a series of warnings. She told her not to describe what she had seen. She advised her not to tell her children. She warned her not to leave anything outside at night that belonged to the family. She also told her not to respond if she ever heard someone calling her name after dark. That was the entire conversation. The neighbor did not explain further and did not name what it was. She spoke the way someone would give instructions for a storm or a flood, not with fear, but with familiarity. It sounded like routine knowledge passed down over time. The message was simple. Follow the precautions. Do not question them. The woman followed everything she was told. After about 3 weeks, the dogs began going outside again. The cattle returned to normal patterns. The motion light stopped triggering. Whatever had been there moved on, lost interest, or found something else. She has never discussed it with her neighbor again. She said some things are better left inside the silence that people who know more than you have chosen to keep. This is the part that matters most, and it is often the part that gets overlooked. Why the Navajo do not talk about it. The common explanation online is that Navajo people are superstitious and believe saying the word summons the creature. That explanation is reductive, condescending, and inaccurate. The real reason is more nuanced and more rational than most people assume. In Navajo philosophical and spiritual tradition, language has power. Words do not simply describe reality, they participate in it. Naming something is not passive. It is a form of engagement. Speaking about something creates a relationship with it. It opens a channel. It makes you visible to it in a way you were not before. This idea is not unique to Navajo thought. Many indigenous traditions share this understanding. If you consider that this framework might reflect something real, then the refusal to discuss it is not superstition, it is strategy. It is a survival protocol refined over generations. Now consider the parallel. This channel has documented a consistent pattern across the American wilderness. There are reports of something that is aware of people. It mimics voices. It returns to the same locations. It triggers sensors while avoiding cameras. It behaves with patience and intelligence. The people who have lived with this the longest tend to agree on one thing: avoid engaging with it. Maybe that is advice worth taking seriously. This next account is brief, but it lingers. A man was driving through a remote section of the Navajo Nation at night in the summer of 2020. He stopped at a small gas station to pay for fuel and buy water. The attendant was a Navajo woman in her 60s. As he was leaving, she asked how fast his car could go. He told her it was a newer sedan, probably around 120 miles per hour. She nodded. She then gave him a warning. She told him to continue driving until he reached the highway without stopping. She explained that if anything appeared alongside his vehicle, he should keep his focus forward and maintain speed. If anything appeared in the road, he should navigate around it and continue. If he heard someone calling for help, he should not stop. She asked if he understood. He said yes. She told him to keep moving and returned to reading. He followed her instructions and saw nothing unusual. He does not know whether the warning was specific to that night or something she tells every traveler. What stayed with him was not the warning itself, but how it was delivered. There was no urgency, no fear, no explanation. It sounded routine, as if the danger was constant, as if giving that warning was simply part of living there, like reminding someone to watch their step, a quiet kind of caution. He understood it as a message to stay alert and keep moving. I am not going to define what this phenomenon is. I do not have the authority or knowledge to do that. The Navajo people do, and they have chosen not to share it freely. That choice deserves respect. What can be described are the reports. There are consistent descriptions of something moving too fast. Something that resembles an animal, but has human eyes. Something that mimics voices. Something that appears at night and interacts with the environment in ways that are difficult to capture. something that causes animals to react with fear. The people most familiar with this phenomenon tend to follow a clear set of precautions. They avoid naming it. They avoid acknowledging it. They avoid direct interaction. They avoid responding to it. They avoid moving toward it. These patterns appear again and again. We have been learning this slowly, one account at a time. Maybe it is time to take that pattern seriously. If you have experienced something similar in the Four Corners region, you can contact us through the email in the description. These accounts are handled carefully and with discretion. If you are a member of the Navajo Nation or another indigenous community and feel this video misrepresents your traditions, please reach out. We will listen and correct. If you missed the voice mimicry investigation earlier this week, that video explores the same behavioral pattern in the Pacific Northwest. Subscribe. We post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you are traveling through the desert at night and someone gives you a warning like this, it is worth paying attention. They may understand the situation better than you do.